They had some other victories by encouraging, for example, replacing any ceiling on the number of charter schools you could have. If you had that, that was going to be a disadvantage in applying for these funds. So I mean, they do have some leverage. But even with the enormous increase that took place as a result of the Stimulus Act, where Title I was doubled, Head Start was doubled. That's not going to be in place after this year. You're still talking about the federal government contributing less than 10% of the budgets for public education in the United States. And this is a pretty daring play to increase the leverage of that 10%. Yes?
I don't know if you touched on this earlier because I just looked late, but you mentioned a little bit about the states not wanting the federal government to take over with education. But isn't there a point where when we are ranking states to see who has the best education system, and the fact that there are states that are failing their students, isn't there a point where the federal government needs to say we need to create equal access to equal quality of education?
Well, I think that's a political question in the end. But here's what I would say is that the pursuit of more sensible, fewer, clearer, stronger academic standards is not a bad thing. The pursuit of tests that do a better job of measuring performance than just multiple choice questions is not a bad idea. I'm not against that. I think it's being done in a way to prevent it from being a purely federal play. In other words, what the administration has done is to encourage states to participate in an effort that it helped organize through the National Governors Association and the Chief State School Official, whatever that organization is called, the state superintendents basically. They are mounting an effort voluntary effort with 48 states participating to rewrite the standards for reading and mathematics, grades K through 12. And they now have the draft out. And the administration is encouraging people, basically by saying if you participate in that, you get points in these competitive grant programs. The next step, if that were to work, they'd have to be adopted by 48 state boards of education and all. That might take a couple of years. Is to develop common tests, because you can't have 48 tests developed by each state. And I'm not against that, but because I think it would bring some coherence to something which is right now mush.
Just ask a follow-up question then, but how do you foresee addressing the issue of ESL learners and students with disabilities? And I mean, as of now, the standards are not culturally relevant, except for a specific set of history and a specific set of literature that students are studying in K through 12. And how do you foresee the school boards addressing all of those various issues that they tend to ignore because they tend to focus a lot on race and class and access to resources?
Because they do focus on race and class?
If you address, disabilities, and if you address culturally relevant curriculum, and if you address the standards not being very representative of, even U.S. history, how do you foresee that happening?
I don't. Here's what I would try to get people to focus on. And it's pretty simple to describe and very difficult to achieve. I would say that public schools have a moral obligation to teach kids to be strong readers and writers in English. They have to do that. They don't have a chance if you don't do that. They now are not doing that. in large numbers. The federal people, the federal government and the state governments, they do not know how to order, they do not know how to describe what school districts should do when presented with large numbers of poor kids who come from families that don't speak English and don't read their first language or their only language. It's very hard. We have a lot of evidence now from districts that have been working with particularly Spanish-speaking kids that can be done. It requires a different attitude than the one taken in California or Arizona, where they say there will only be instruction in English after the second year. I mean, you cannot. If you were a wealthy businessman in California where you have initiative and referendum, and you disagreed with your mother died because somebody inserted a stent made by Johnson & Johnson, and you went to the Secretary of State and collected petitions and got 800,000 signatures on it, or whatever, to forbid the use of stents with a description which would make clear that it was Johnson & Johnson, everybody would hail that as a moronic exercise of a popular referendum to determine what medical procedure should be followed under certain circumstances. Nobody would accept that. Yet, nobody questions taking something as complicated as educating Spanish-speaking kids, as having the voters give approval to policies and practices. It's happened in California, it's happened in Arizona. Arizona now ranks 48th in fourth grade reading. California now ranks 44th. And by the way, both states are teaching a high percentage of kids who come from Spanish-speaking homes. What are you, crazy? This is not a problem where there's an answer that is a policy answer that says do this, do that, and you'll succeed. There are, however, answers that say let's provide the policies and the funding and the practices that will allow you to start earlier and better with kids who are poor. Yes?
I had a question. I know you talked a lot about reading and writing, and I was wondering if you think the same type of policies apply to mathematics and science, because in terms of trying to move America forward also technologically and keeping up with a lot of other countries around the world, our science and math is really another area where we're lagging behind.
Right. It's not an exact connection, but in places where kids don't read and write well, they usually don't do math very well either. And they don't do very well in science. And I'm not advocating, because I wish I had as much confidence in and knowledge about programs for mathematics that were similar to what we know about literacy. And I don't. I mean, that's not as well developed. We have less evidence about that. But we're developing it. But I do think that you have to start with, I think you have to make literacy the foundation for this. Because we know that if you have a lot of ninth graders who are reading at fifth grade level, sixth grade level in your high school, you've got about zero chance of getting them to read on grade level and do all the other content that is expected now of high school students. Yes?
I was just wondering,